My dad disowned me because I refused to pay for my golden brother's wedding, so I took back the house he had given me. I never imagined a single refusal could blow up my entire family. It all started on a humid Tuesday afternoon, the kind where sweat sticks to your back even in the shade. I had just finished a long shift and was slouched on the couch, sipping a watered-down lemonade, when Dad called. No small talk. No how are you? Just the ask. Your brother's getting married in June, he said. He needs help covering the cost. We want you to take care of the venue deposit. I blinked. How much? 25,000. I choked on my drink. Maybe if he'd asked for $5,000, or even 10, I might have considered it. But 25? That was 2 years of my savings, tucked away for a down payment on a new place, or maybe even starting the business I'd been dreaming of. It wasn't a favor, it was a sacrifice. I tried to laugh it off. That's a lot, Dad. You're doing well, he said, like that settled it. No mortgage, no kids. What do you even need the money for? I rubbed my temples. I'm not paying that. There was a pause. Not silence, he was breathing, hard and fast, like he couldn't believe I'd said it. Then the tone changed. You think you're too good for this family now? It spiraled from there. I told him I wasn't a bank. He said my brother would have done it for me. I reminded him that my brother, Jason, had never done anything for me except borrow and forget to pay back. Dad brought up the house. I said something I shouldn't have. He hung up. 2 days later, I got the text, "You're no longer my son." Just like that. I didn't cry. Not at first. I walked outside and sat on the porch steps of the house I'd bought, the house that used to be his. That's the part that still stings. A decade ago, when Mom passed and the recession hit, Dad was drowning in bills. I was 26, newly promoted, and flush with savings. I offered to buy the house from him, not just to help, but because I couldn't stand the thought of strangers living in the place where I'd grown up. We signed the paperwork. I let him stay. No rent. No strings. He lived there, called it his house, and I never corrected him. Until now. I gave it 2 weeks. 2 weeks of silence. Then I called him, no answer. I called Jason, straight to voicemail. I even tried Uncle Dave, who said, "It's best you leave it alone." But how do you leave it alone when your father disowns you over a wedding? So I drove over. He wasn't home. I walked through the front door, my key still worked, and stood in the living room, looking at the old recliner he never let anyone else sit in. The TV was on. Someone had paused the news mid-sentence. A mug sat half empty on the coffee table. I left a note. You're living in my house. Either we talk, or you move. Maybe it was petty. Maybe it was overdue. He didn't call. But a week later, I got a letter, yes, a letter, on actual paper. You're right. It's your house. Come get it. We'll be out by the end of the month. No signature. Just the words. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it neatly and placed it in the drawer where I keep old things that mean something, even if they shouldn't. By the end of the month, he was gone. The living room was empty. The bedroom, too. Just a single nail in the wall where the photo of Mom used to hang. I stood in that quiet house, and for the first time in years, I felt like a stranger in my own home. But it didn't end there. Because the house was just the beginning. The day I moved back into the house, I didn't bring much. Just a duffel bag, a laptop, and a box of old books. I didn't need anything else. Most of my stuff was still at my apartment, where life had structure: morning coffee, work, gym, dinner alone, sleep. This place, though, it was different. Heavy. Like it still remembered everything that had happened inside its walls. I thought the silence would be the hardest part. But it was the small details that got to me. Like the creak in the floorboard outside Dad's bedroom. The water stain on the ceiling that looked like it had grown, even though no one had used the upstairs bathroom in months. Or the faint scent of his aftershave clinging to the air like a memory too stubborn to leave. He was gone, but somehow he was still everywhere. I didn't tell anyone I'd moved back in. Not my friends, not my coworkers, not even Rachel, my ex, who still texted me once in a while, always late, always just a few words that said everything and nothing at once. I needed time to think. To breathe. But thinking only made it worse. At night, I'd sit in the kitchen with the light off, nursing a beer and staring at the spot where Mom used to read her morning paper. I remembered how she'd hum while stirring her tea, how she'd always cut the articles out and tape them to the fridge if they mentioned anything about our town. She'd say, even small places have stories worth remembering. Funny how things stick. On the fifth night, I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened it to find a man in his 60s standing there, holding a faded red toolbox. He wore a patched-up coat, and his face was tanned, with deep lines etched across his forehead. "Greg," he said. "Yeah?" He looked past me into the house. "I'm Joe. Your dad used to have me fix the gutters. He said you might be coming back." I figured I'd check if anything needs work. I hesitated. I wanted to slam the door. I also wanted to ask if Dad had talked about me, what he'd said, if he sounded angry or proud or just tired. But all I said was, "The back porch is sagging." He nodded. "I'll take a look." Joe came back the next day. And the day after. We didn't talk much, but his presence filled a gap I hadn't realized was there. Sometimes he'd bring coffee and leave it by the steps. Once, he left a folded newspaper with an article circled in pen, "Local veteran celebrates 50 years in service." Dad had underlined the quote, "It's not about pride. It's about showing up when it matters." I stared at it for a long time. Then, one morning, I found an envelope shoved under the front door. No name, no return address. Inside was a photo of Jason and his fiancée standing in front of a church. On the back, someone had written in neat cursive, "Wish you were there." I crushed it in my fist. Was it guilt? Spite? An olive branch? I didn't know. But it lit something in me. I pulled up my phone and scrolled through messages I hadn't opened in weeks. Group chats from cousins. A birthday text from Aunt Michelle. A blurry photo from a friend's kid's recital. I was still part of their world, barely. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to disappear. And I wasn't going to let them rewrite the story. If they wanted to pretend I turned my back, I'd show them what really happened. I started with the paperwork. Found the old emails, the bank transfers, the deed. All proof that I hadn't just taken the house, I'd bought it. Legally. Willingly. Generously. Then I wrote it all out. Every call. Every message. Every refusal. I put it into a long, honest letter and sent it to the people who mattered. Some responded with silence. But others didn't. Aunt Michelle called. She said she never knew the full story. She cried. So did I. Cousin Brian invited me to dinner. He toasted to truth. And Rachel? She showed up at my door with a carton of Thai food and a bottle of wine. "I miss this place," she said, stepping inside without asking. She didn't stay long. But as she left, she turned and said, "You're not the villain here. Just don't let it turn you into one." That stuck with me. Because the thing about family feuds, they don't just scar. They infect. And deep down, I could feel it growing. The anger. The need to prove I was right. The urge to take back more than just the house. The first time I drove by Jason's new place, I told myself it was just curiosity. It was a modest 2-story rental on the east side of town, with a small yard and a string of plastic lanterns hung across the porch. It looked temporary, like something you'd settle for while waiting for the real dream to materialize. A woman came out carrying a laundry basket. His fiancée, Melissa. I'd met her twice, maybe 3 times before all this. Sweet, soft-spoken, the kind of person who always found something kind to say, even when you didn't deserve it. She looked older than I remembered, or maybe just tired. Then Jason came out. He didn't see me. He was wearing shorts and flip-flops and talking on the phone, pacing the sidewalk with the same overconfident swagger he had when we were kids. That's when I realized something painful. He was happy. Not just content. Not just surviving. Happy. And somehow, that made me furious. I didn't want to admit it, but there was a part of me, dark and petty, that wanted him to feel even a fraction of what I'd gone through. The sleepless nights. The silence from our father. The gut-punch loneliness of being cut out. And yet, there he was, smiling under the string lights. I drove off, fast, feeling something hollow in my chest. The next day, I woke up to a voicemail from Dad. I stared at my phone like it was some cursed object. My finger hovered over delete, but I couldn't do it. I pressed play. This is probably a bad idea. I don't know. I heard you've been asking around. Talking to people. That's not gonna change anything. You made your choice. Just stop stirring things up. Let it be. Click. No bye. No I love you. Just a warning, disguised as advice. But I couldn't let it be. So I did the one thing he never expected. I invited them all. Every relative. Every friend. Even Melissa. I sent out printed invitations for a dinner at the house, yes, the house. The one that used to be his. I called it a night of truth. Cheesy? Maybe. But I needed to reclaim something, even if I didn't know what. I spent the week cleaning, cooking, setting up tables in the backyard. I borrowed heaters and strung up lights in the trees. I told myself this wasn't about revenge. It was about facing the fracture, even if no one showed up. But they did. 27 people. More than I expected. Cousins. Neighbors. My old history teacher, who used to carpool with Dad to a union job years ago. Even Rachel came late, as always, with a bottle of wine and that look that said she didn't believe any of this would go well. The last to arrive? Jason. Alone. He looked around, cautious. Tense. Like he expected someone to leap out of the bushes and accuse him of something. You invited Dad, he asked, after a long silence between us near the grill. I nodded. Didn't show. He gave a tight nod. Didn't think he would. We didn't talk about the wedding. Or the money. Or the house. We talked about the shed we'd built with him in 7th grade. The summer we tried to trap a raccoon and accidentally caught a neighbor's cat. We laughed, awkward, reluctant, but real. Then he looked at me and said, you know, he doesn't hate you. He just doesn't know how to forgive you for saying no. I stared at him. I didn't think I needed forgiveness for that. You didn't. But that doesn't change him. The next morning, I found a note taped to the front door. I drove by. Saw the lights. Heard the voices. You're right, it was your house. You earned it. Doesn't mean I know how to let it go. No name. No apology. But it was the closest I'd get. That night, I sat on the porch with a glass of whiskey and finally let myself remember the good parts of him. How he taught me to change a tire. How he used to leave me notes in my lunchbox, even in high school, scribbled on receipts and post-its. How he stood at Mom's funeral, gripping my shoulders so hard it bruised. He was never perfect. But he tried, in his own way. I didn't know what came next. But for the first time in months, I didn't need to. 3 weeks passed after the dinner. The air shifted. It wasn't peace exactly, but something close. Like the house had exhaled for the first time in years. I started sleeping better. My appetite returned. I even began to make small improvements to the place, repainting the hallway, fixing the back door hinge, clearing out the garage. That's when I found the box. It was tucked in the far corner of the garage attic, beneath a stained tarp and an old lawnmower Dad swore he'd fix someday. The box was unmarked, sealed with brittle packing tape. Inside, photos. Letters. Receipts. Even an old shoebox with loose coins and keys. And a folder labeled Greg, House Transfer 2013. I sat cross-legged on the concrete, dust coating my palms, as I went through it all. And I realized something, he'd kept everything. Every email I'd sent about the deal. Every signed paper. Even the thank you card I'd written after he let me stay there for a few months after my layoff back in 2016. I'd forgotten about that. But he hadn't. There was a letter too, never sent. Just a torn notebook page with half a paragraph. If you're reading this, it probably means I messed it up. Again. You gave me more than I ever gave you. I didn't know how to say thank you without feeling small. That line stayed with me. Long after I closed the box. Long after I retaped it and slid it under the bed like a time capsule of a man who could never quite say what he felt. I could have reached out. Called. Written back. But I didn't. Instead, I focused on the house. I made it mine, not just legally, but in spirit. I replaced the curtains Mom had hung 20 years ago with something modern. Took down Dad's old framed golf scores and put up art I actually liked. And still, I left one thing. The photo of all three of us at the county fair in 2002. The one where Dad's grinning with cotton candy in his hand, and Jason and I are throwing popcorn at each other. That one stayed in the hallway. Because as much as I wanted to move on, I didn't want to erase everything. One evening, while I was sanding down the old porch railing, my phone rang. It was Melissa. I hesitated. Answered. "Hey," she said, voice shaky. I didn't know who else to call. "What's wrong?" "It's your dad. He collapsed. Jason called an ambulance." My hand went numb. The sander buzzed in my lap, forgotten. "Where?" She told me. I was in the car within 5 minutes. At the hospital, the lights felt too bright. The walls too clean. Jason was in the waiting room, pacing like a trapped animal. "He's stable," he said before I could even ask. "Minor stroke. They're monitoring him." "And then, you didn't have to come." "I know," I said. He nodded once, not looking at me. We sat in silence until a nurse told us we could see him. The man in the hospital bed looked older than I remembered. Smaller. He turned his head slowly when we entered. "Boys," he said, voice rough but steady. That was it. We stood there, two grown men who hadn't shared a room with their father in almost a year, and we didn't know what to do with our hands, our eyes, our words. Finally, I stepped forward. "You scared the hell out of us." A corner of his mouth twitched. Maybe a smile. "Didn't mean to." He looked at Jason, then back at me. "I'm tired," he said. "Not just today. Just tired of fighting." No one said anything. He closed his eyes. "Stay for a bit?" We did. That night, back at the house, I walked through each room slowly. It felt different. Not haunted anymore. Just quiet. Like it had been waiting for this moment of stillness. And I realized something. It was never about the money. Not really. It was about power. Pride. Old wounds. A father who never learned how to say "I need you." A son who never stopped trying to be seen. And a house caught in the middle. Dad came home a week later. Not to the house, but to Jason's. At least for now. The doctors recommended he have someone nearby for a while, and Jason volunteered without hesitation. I offered too, but he shook his head. "It's better this way," he said. And maybe he was right. I visited often. Sometimes I'd bring groceries, sometimes I'd just sit with him on the porch and talk about neutral things, the weather, baseball, the neighbor's loud dog. We avoided the big stuff at first, like two countries in a fragile truce, neither willing to break it. But time does something funny. It wears down the sharp edges. One Sunday afternoon, as the light turned gold across the lawn, he asked me, "Do you like living there?" I blinked. "At the house?" He nodded. "I do," I said. I didn't at first. But now, yeah. He smiled slightly. "Your mother would be happy it stayed in the family." There was a pause. He looked down at his hands, gnarled and shaking just a bit now. "I was wrong, you know. About a lot of things." I didn't speak. "You were always the one who planned ahead. Jason lived in the moment, but you built things. Quietly. I didn't see it when I should have. I wanted to say, you still don't, but I didn't. Instead, I asked, do you regret what you said? When you told me I wasn't your son?" He didn't flinch. "Yes," he said. It was quiet, but it landed hard. I was angry. I wanted to blame someone, and you were the only one strong enough to take it. It wasn't an apology. Not fully. But it was real. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. That night, I returned to the house and stood in the living room. I touched the banister I used to slide down as a kid. I traced the scratches in the floor from the time Jason tried to ride his scooter indoors. I found the corner of the kitchen where Mom used to post our grades with magnets shaped like vegetables. The house was still here. And so was I. And so, slowly, was my family, fractured but mending. Melissa visited often, sometimes with Jason, sometimes alone. She brought over leftover lasagna or asked for help fixing a broken lamp. Her presence felt like an olive branch wrapped in kindness. Rachel stopped by less frequently, but when she did, it wasn't awkward anymore. We talked like old friends who understood why they didn't work, but still cared anyway. The real surprise came one crisp autumn morning. Dad called. Not a text. Not a letter. A call. I was thinking, he said, maybe we should fix the shed. Together. Like we did before. I smiled. Yeah. That sounds good. We worked on it for 3 weekends in a row. Mostly in silence, but it wasn't the heavy kind. It was comfortable. Steady. The 4th weekend, we took a break and sat in lawn chairs facing the backyard. He handed me a cold drink and said, "You know, it's funny. You spent your whole life trying to earn my respect. And I spent mine too proud to say you already had it." That was the moment it shifted. Not everything was fixed. But we weren't broken anymore. Years from now, I know I'll look back on this whole mess and still feel a twinge of sadness. For what was lost. For what we said in anger. For the time wasted in silence. But I'll also remember that family isn't about being right. It's about showing up. About facing the hard truths. About choosing to love even when it hurts. I walk through this house now and feel something new. Not grief. Not guilt. Just life. And that's enough. Thank you for watching the video. Like it if you watched the video to the end and don't forget to subscribe. Have a nice day.